Well, we've got to accentuate the positive and eliminate the negative, and sadly spend most of this podcast with Mr. In-Between. That's me, Toby Hadoke, commentating along and seeing if I can guess my special guests' favourite things about their particular choice of Doctor Who episode. It's Happy Times and Places.
Hello Toby, it's Stephen Cranford here. I'm a TV and radio broadcaster living at Worthing down in West Sussex. Now, I'd like to thank you for letting me choose my favourite Doctor Who story to have a chat with you about. For me, this has to be the one I have the earliest strong memories for, which is the 1978 story, The Stones of Blood from the Key to Time season. For me, this was the first story that I can remember with real clarity, and it terrified me as a 6-year-old all those years ago. Now, I'm going to tell you some of the favourite things I have from various episodes. So here we go then.
Hello and welcome to another Happy Times and Places. That was Stephen Cranford who sent a video. I'm sorry you cannot see him. He sent a video, I think, during lockdown. This is how long ago those first appeals were sent out to people to take part in this podcast, and obviously I've mixed them about a bit, and I didn't do them in the order that I received them because I may have got 3 Tom Bakers in a row or whatever, and or if I did get Tom Bakers, Rebus Operation was an early one, Power of Kroll was an early one, so I needed to not do everything from the same season. So Stephen has been pushed back, and that is no reflection on him, because he's a fabulous fellow, and I always feel a bit guilty about Stephen because he's a proper presenter. He presents on the radio and on television. He also builds on television. He's a hunky builder, and his Instagram feed is quite an eye-opener, but maybe we'll talk about that in the closing credits. He's a buff builder. He's in very good shape, but he's a very nice chap. He very kindly introduced me to John Griffiths, who edited the opening titles of Doctor Who, the first ever opening titles of Doctor Who, and did some work on the putting the signal HowlRound shapes together in those very early days, but also edited Dalek Invasion of Earth, but then moved from being an editor to being a floor manager, production assistant type, and worked on The Mind of Evil. So I went to John's house, and John is the reason I have my remote controls stuck to a baseball bat, because he had his remote controls stuck to a tray, which meant he never lost them, and I like that system. I've tried, actually I did get a tray last Christmas and stuck my remote controls on those, but apparently the tray is too heavy, and that has not gone down well with the other half, who has trouble lifting heavy things, so they've all been removed, and now we can't find them, which proves the point that the sticking on tray system is a good one and will eventually lead to some form of schism/divorce/ murder. But anyway, that is the universe of my own terrors that I have to face. Stephen is a lovely chap, and has always been very helpful and very encouraging, despite the fact I think he has every right to go, hang on, he should be doing some of the stuff that I do, but there's no there's no rancour in him, and if he does think I'm some sort of interloper or usurper, he's never given me that impression. But I'm an open book, and so if I have a worry about something, I'll say it out loud, and that's my worry with Stephen. I think he's a very, well, I don't think he is. He's a very capable presenter, and could easily be involved in the home media range more than he is. His experience and track record are actually, I was going to say more impressive than mine. I don't have one really outside of Doctor Who. So anyway, but Stephen has always been very helpful and encouraging, and always shared any contacts. And we had a mutual friend in the wonderful Annabelle Giles, who, as I record this, passed away not that long ago. Stephen actually knew her better than I did. I didn't know they were mutual friends, but I'm reminded of her every time I think of him now, because she always used to pop up in the mutuals, and I know we both liked her very much, and she was far too young. But anyway, and she came to see my Doctor Who scarf when it visited Brighton. So anyway, listen, seize the day, and let us seize the day with the Stones of Blood. And Steve Cranford, who, as I say, I think recorded his contribution during lockdown, because that was when I started doing these. We are way out of that, thank goodness. And as I record this, I'm looking forward to pastures new. So let's before I do that, let's go way back in time to a Doctor Who story. It's just too early for me to remember being on. I do remember a repeat of The Pirate Planet, which is the story that precedes this, but I don't remember this until I was collecting bootlegs a lot later. I have an interesting relationship with the Stones of Blood. I got the book. I won a prize at school, and it was the book in the school bookshop that was a Doctor Who book. So my copy has a sort of bit of card in that says, this is for winning the English prize or whatever, which I'm not sure how I feel about now because it's sullied my copy of the book. But I'll always associate, and because of course it's the 100th story, so I suppose it seems right. It should be just the one that was there. It's always had that slightly special aspect to it. It also stuck out of the Key to Time season as, to me, seeming like the Doctor Who story that Doctor Who stories should be in a season that was full of stories that as a kid didn't feel like they were what Doctor Who stories were. From previous editions of this podcast, I love the Rebus operation. I have a soft spot for the Power of Kroll, even though I'm aware of its faults. I think Douglas Adams is a genius, so Pirate Planet has lots to recommend it. Androids of Tara is one of my 10 out of 10s. But the sort of Ruritanian, if you like, vibe of Rebus and Androids, even though they're absolutely to my taste, as a grown-up, as a kid, they felt like they were sort of slightly perhaps too science fiction light for the Doctor Who that I wanted. Pirate Planet at the time seemed, a slightly zanier option. I never really knew anything about the Power of Kroll. It was one that nobody really talked about. And Armageddon Factor, yes, big season ending, but it didn't sort of have a monster. And so again, it kind of felt like perhaps it was slightly lacking. Whereas the Stones of Blood, nighttime, blood-sucking stones, even the title, this definitely seemed to be the story that on paper was the one that would be the Key to Time story for me. And fan lore seemed to support that. It won the award that year, and that was written up in Doctor Who Celebration, I think. So I knew that that the Stones of Blood, that the fan wisdom was that this was the strong one, and it was no surprise because it had the sexiest title, frankly, and had the great eccentric character of Amelia Rumford, who was headline news. And even there was Doctor Who magazine did an article called Great Eccentrics. Real filler. But I didn't mind at the time because it told me who some of the actors who played some of the characters were. But real filler. Come on. Shall we do an article about eccentrics in TV's Doctor Who? But when I came to watch it, and subsequently, and I know this is going to lose me some friends, I've always had a bit of a downer on the Stones of Blood. Not because I don't think it's any good, but because I don't think it's as good as a lot of the other stories in season 16. If I was to do, I sometimes do that top 3 poll I used to on Gallifrey Base, and will sometimes, do polls on Twitter if one takes my fancy or just pops up in my feed. I would probably place as first, second, and third in season 16, Rebus, Pirate Planet, and Androids of Tara. Not in that order. I'd probably go Androids, Rebus, Pirate Planet, maybe. With Stones of Blood, well, I as I say, I've got a soft spot for Kroll, you see, so I might even, stick up for that. Even though I suspect Stones of Blood is probably better. But I'm talking about taste here as well, which you can't account for. And, personal experience. And I remember being a bit disappointed by this the first time I watched it, having enjoyed the book, and it never quite coming up to scratch ever since. Now, I know that happy times and places can change all that, and I'm looking forward to that being the case. But I'm putting my cards on the table early on, and I think my main thing with it is the sort of slightly grotty, grey, flat outside videotape. I'm very much a film kind of guy, and I know there's many reasons to shoot the outside scenes on videotape, but they don't help with the atmosphere for me. Because I remember when one tried to shoot one's own things, when I got hold of a video camera, borrowed a friend's, or used a school one, and thought, I can shoot a horror film, and then you'd film it and you go, why does it look so crap? Because it's on videotape, it's not on film, for starters, and because you can't light it, or you didn't when you were making things as an amateur, So it carries a bit of baggage. A lot of that baggage is to do with disappointment. After initial instinct had led me to believe this would be the one for me, especially as Hammer Meets Doctor Who is very much my cup of tea, and I'm very much gothic horror more than sci-fi, so I should like this more than Pirate Planet. I like monsters, more than I like. I like it. I like to have a monster, so it should beat Rebos and Android Zatara for me, but it never has. And I'd go, well, Rebos and androids have such great characters. Well, this does have Amelia Mumford. So let's see. Let's see why my initial instinct is a slightly tentative one, and my initial feelings somewhat tepid. And maybe the delightful Stephen will be able to turn my head in its direction as well. Let's see, as we play The Stones of Blood, Part 1, in 3, 2, 1. So yes, I suppose I could have said some of that during the opening titles, because as soon as they started, I thought, I've got nothing to say here, because it's the opening titles that I've seen so many times. I suppose I could say I'm watching this on iPlayer, because the whole of the Whoniverse is now on iPlayer. Isn't that an extraordinary thing? How glorious that passers-by can watch this. David Fisher. Never had the pleasure of meeting David Fisher. So, of course, always nice to see a TARDIS in flight, but that's I would say, a fairly modest example. We have better ones, particularly the one in Pyramids, or the ones in season 18. And this is directed by Daryl Blake, who I've had the pleasure of lunching with a couple of times. I've been to his house because he worked on Quatermass 2 as a design assistant. He's an extraordinary good nick, considering I think he's well into his 80s now, but he could pass for 60, I think, Daryl. And he's an interesting man who's always very happily answered questions. But he was a designer, and he was a design assistant, not even an official title that really on Quatermass 2. He was a kid, but anyway, he's one of the last survivors of that production, and has given me some nice insight into that. But he only directed this one Doctor Who, and then after that you'd see his name pop up on things like Brookside. He was still directing, well into, me being of an age where I would look at the credits of things and spot people. Now that's beautiful. A moon popping from behind a cloud. Very, very Doctor Who. This is what we like. Very Hammer horror as well. Cloaked figures inside. It's funny because, talking of Quatermass, the original plan was to do the fourth Quatermass, which ended up going out in 1979. Before this, so in 73, for the BBC, and that featured stone circles. And the production that we have is a multi-million-pound all-film production with a stone circle, shot on location, on film, looking gorgeous. If it had been done by the BBC as originally planned in the early 70s, it would have looked a bit like this. And I think one of the most remarkable factors of that Quatermass is that it is a gorgeous film production with beautiful dystopian vibe to it because of the filmic look. It would be very different if it looked like this, which it would have done. It would have had that, jarring of video to film, which actually this doesn't have because the location is shot on videotape. So this is all right. This is quite effectively done. The heartbeat is always an effective thing. One thinks of Fury from the Deep and the offstage heartbeat that provides so much atmosphere. That was nicely lit at night, cowled figures, a POV of something big, and the glowing stones with the blood being poured on them. That's an effective start. So, and I love this costume, and I love the way she puts her hand on her hips. And he doesn't even look at her and says that she looks ravishing, but she is absolutely stunning. And I love her. I love the way that she enters then. But there was supposed to be a scene, wasn't there, where the Doctor is presented with a birthday cake because it's the 100th Doctor Who story. Now, beware the Black Guardian, says the White Guardian, but that is not the voice of Cyril Luckham because they weren't going to hire him to just be a voiceover. So that's the voice of Gerald Cross, who is one of the Megara later in the story, who they will have got to do that. It's funny, isn't it, that they have this sort of cupboard off the TARDIS that doesn't even have walls, that they keep the key to time in. It's a real sign, isn't it? That I actually don't think it's a bad policy to go, well, if we can't show it, let's just have black walls in the door entrance. I don't think having the set dressing of the filing cabinet or whatever it is, or the safe in the corner helps. I think they should probably have gone, let's have nothing in there. But I quite like that that they have this little off room where they discuss key business of the key. Oh yes, so he's only now filling Romana in about the White Guardian and the Black Guardian. She's got an excellent flat cap, which I think people have started wearing. I wear a flat cap. Still means some idiots think I'm a farmer, or they think they should tell me that I think I'm a farmer. But anyway, never mind. But I think she can definitely carry it off. These two, if you ever listen to them on a DVD commentary, get on like a house on fire, which is rather delightful. But this is all a bit of catch up, isn't it? Which I suppose you need if you've got a season arc. He's telling us everything we already know if we remember what's happened, 8 episodes previously. But I think that's fine. I think that's fine when you've got 4 episodes and you want to keep this arc. You don't want the key to time to always be conveniently forgotten within the story. So I never mind if with this they seed it into the storytelling, and a recap is acceptable. Probably more acceptable than the receipt of a birthday cake. Oh, he's got an umbrella. He's very good, isn't he? He's very good, and he's very funny again. But he does have a kind of I always think he's got around this time. Tom Baker's got an attitude of going, I might not give a performance if I don't want to. There's always that kind of, I'll just give it a dirty look and give it that sort of snide energy he sometimes does. But then a smile breaks. But I think this is always the threat that he's not going to play ball. But I'm pretty sure Daryl likes Tom. They're not actually dissimilar in build, actually. But yes, here we have the videotape. This looks all right here because it's nicely shot. It's a nice... I'm not sure I approve of Doctor Who throwing his umbrella away. I'm sure if I'd said that to him, he'd have said, I'm a Time Lord from the constellation of Customerus. How the F do you know what I'd do? But I just think it's not a good message to send to children, that if you're in the countryside, you throw your rubbish. But there we go. That's probably me being a little bit too serious. But here, this is good. We're straight into the mystery. They don't have any heavy elephants around here, so something heavy is walking around where they've landed. Beautiful, great setup of the mystery. I do like the way she puts her hand on her hip. It just makes her seem very sort of game and capable. And there is something evocative, isn't there, about stones? I think it, as I get older, I think it about trees as well, because of course most trees you walk past will have been around before you and will be there after you. Although we've lost a lot recently in the inclement weather, but there is something, and I know I've already mentioned Quatermass, but Nigel Neal is very big on stones, and there is something about these edifices that is very humbling, because they've stood there impassive and immobile, slowly being worn down by time, but they're not worn down by time as quickly as we are. And you can connect with people who've, well, you can't, but where you're touching is where somebody who lived and died hundreds and thousands of years before you did, and yet breathed the same air, felt the same textures, saw the same sights, smelled the same smells, felt everything as palpably as you do. Yeah, she wears even just a big shirt with a belt well, doesn't she? And here we have Amelia Rumford, played by the great Beatrix Lehman, who I always remember Tom Baker on the Tom Baker years going, she used to drink Punta Mes. And I saw Punta Mes in a pub once, and it wasn't spelt how I expected it to be spelt. And of course I couldn't help seeing it without thinking of Beatrix Lehman, and it's Punta Mes it's a kind of it's like a red martini. It's a sort of vermouth, but I've never had it, but it's a sort of reddy dark browny colour, and I don't know what you have it with. What do you have with Punta Mes? Presumably you dilute it with something. But anyway, Beatrix Lehman used to drink Punta Mes. And there are Beatrix Lehman stories that I have read in a number of books by other actors, but none of them spring to mind now. But I will maybe do my homework for future episodes. I like the name Dr. Borlase. I don't know, it just seems to be evocative of times gone by. It was her last job, I think, wasn't it? I think that's the other thing that Tom Baker says in the Tom Baker years, is that it was marvellous because it was Beatrix Lehman's last job, and she died not long after this, and I think she's very jolly. I don't think she's always on top of her lines, so I don't think it's the. I know everyone was charmed by her, and she is very charming, but I don't think it's quite the performance that it is noted to be, because she's not as on top of it as you would like. But I do like the whole sort of female vibe that this has been given. The fact that you have these two ladies, and you can have fun imagining them as being slightly more than friends if you want to, that there's some sort of is it sophistry or sapphicness amongst the scientifics, and I do love Susan Engel, who I think is a woman of great elegance and an actress of enormous skill. I've had the pleasure of meeting her. I've also had the pleasure of seeing her on stage, and still going strong. But she's definitely older now than Beatrix Lehman is there. But look at that! Isn't that great and unusual for Doctor Who of this time to have a four-shot and the Doctor's the only male, which which I think does give this story a special kind of feel to it, and especially as the villainess, the Cessair of Diplos, is actually represented as somebody who has existed through time as well, so that there's this female line of villains, even though it's the same one, but that means the sort of high female count is about more than the characters we see on screen now. That we have this heavy history, and that shouldn't be unusual. 50% of the population and all of that, but in Doctor Who, it does mark this out as being rather different. So, and actually, I'm quite enjoying the but it does have a different feel, doesn't it? The videotape, and when the stuff that is shot on film does look better, but I'm not enjoying this new look, as it were. It's certainly better quality and fresher and more vibrant than I would perhaps usually imagine it to be. I think when the sun goes in a bit, there's a problem, and of course that very white of the sky slightly blasts out the background. Love the crow. I love that as a motif, and it's a lovely piece of horror shortcut in it, and it buys into all the sort of Dennis Wheatley kind of feel that this have. My brother had the Dennis Wheatley books of The Devil Rides Out and all of that, and there were books that had pictures of Aleister Crowley and records as well, because I'm sure, is it Iron Maiden or Whitesnake or one of those, Mr. Crowley, won't me show you your white horse, and that felt terribly grown up, that heavy metal singers would sing about the devil, and I kind of believed the devil was actually from more than fiction. The idea that that there were people like Aleister Crowley who apparently the devil had manifested for meant that it had a more realistic vibe than a lot of science fiction-y stuff. So this was quite close to the bone, the devil worship stuff. It wasn't from quite the same school as other science fiction or even horror threats, because Dracula and Frankenstein, they were from literature, whereas although the Dennis Wheatley books were literature, they seemed to somehow be based on reality in a way. Even though I didn't believe in God or the devil, the black magic seemed somehow a threat that at least had possibilities about it. So this stuff should kind of work. And Nicholas McArdle here is an actor of no mean pedigree, and he's a wonderfully voiced actor who does lots of beautiful book readings and stuff. And I've spent time with Nick, and he's a lovely chap, good friend of Peter Miles, and a very, as I say, gently voiced man. But I find these two, De Vries and Martha, to be a bit shit. I don't know how else to do it. I think there are ways of doing that sort of devil worshipy stuff that can be like, for example, Roger Delgado in The Demons, who does that stuff and makes it seem natural and rich and resident. And there are ways not to do it, and I feel it's a little homespun here. It's a little bit. It doesn't quite. Thomas Borlase is a great name, you see, and again, all of this stuff of rooting this in the past. And of rooting the study of the mysticism with people long dead, with names like Dr. Borlase, I think is very effective, because it's evocative, and anything, again, that sort of touches us into ancient mysticism or touches us into figures from the past who are now long dead ties in with that whole thing of these things outlasting mortals, which includes us. That's a nice, again, another nice little addition to the mystery. If you go, we've got missing pictures, well, they're going to be a clue to something. But it's a nice visual. The Wicked Lady Montcalm. all of that is glorious. I like all of that. And of course they're all clues as to the nature of the threat, who will reveal herself later on. So yes, it's piling on the mystery nice and early. And this is nice. Oh, and a glass of sherry. Don't get much alcohol and indeed smoking in Doctor Who, when you get both in this. So that always makes it feel a little bit grown up. And anything, certainly my younger self, when Doctor Who felt a bit grown up, I always rather liked that. And I do kind of miss that now, where you can do that stuff and not sort of bat an eyelid. And in fact, if I saw alcohol and smoking in Doctor Who now, I'm not sure how I'd feel. But when I come to it from the other end, as a younger person who wanted my show to be a bit grown up, that made me feel like I was really playing with the big boys, which is odd, because my mum smoked, so smoking wasn't cool, and I didn't smoke, whereas all my, a lot of my mates wanted to smoke because it was transgressive and exciting, whereas for me it was what my mum did. But they then all went through it as a phase. And then I started smoking at university, and by the time they'd sort of given it up, I was chain smoking, which I did for many, many years. But, and of course you don't see any smoking. It's always a bit of a surprise when you see, because I think Mary Tam smoked, and Tom Baker definitely did. But I like the fact that he didn't smoke when you could see children. But it's funny, because I sort of think of nobody, no regulars from Doctor Who as smokers. I saw a picture of John Pertwee with a fag in his hand the other day. So, of course, and Hartnell did, so they were all... It's when you see Elizabeth Sladen in that read-through for Robot, where everyone's smoking. People aren't smoking a fag, are smoking a pipe. It's very different when you have an image, drawn from what you see of people on television, which is, of course, a false image. That long, lingering shot on the Crow is excellent, and again it's just got a very black background, but beautiful, and it gets in nice and close, and then focus on the Doctor. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I love that. That's a lovely piece of direction. Got a fag going on here. It's a very 70s brown, that suit, isn't it? Well, his neck hasn't changed at all. He's greyer now, but he's still got the same hairline and the moustache. I love the way Tom Baker sits on a chair rather insolently. He sort of, he won't sit up straight. He's not, whereas, Pertwee is very sort of elegant. He might recline elegantly, but he would also sort of sit upright and sort of obey the decorum of the room, especially if he was on somebody else's turf. But especially if they were, royalty. But I rather like, Pertwee could, yes, I know Pertwee could be insolent if he wanted to be, particularly with figures of authority, but, bureaucratic authority, that's a brilliant shot. But Tom Baker is very insolent. But again, you kind of get the impression that that's not far from the truth with him if he wants to be. Great shot of great use of the live animal in the studio, which is not, again, not a common thing for Doctor Who. Hello? That's yeah, they put their cards on the table pretty quickly with this, don't they? There's... in other stories... Oh, that's pretty grim as well, the way pulls him up by the hair. But they don't hide the malignancy of De Vries. Well, no, we've seen him in the opening scene, of course, but he doesn't pull the wool over the Doctor's eyes for very long, and you would expect perhaps him as the obvious baddie to maybe be the baddie for the whole story, but obviously this will not be the case, as we will discover in the following episode. But it's an unusual. It seems that they play that card fairly early, and it's because the story will go off into unexpected directions. This cliffhanger is slightly weird because Tom Baker wouldn't shoot the bit to show the Doctor luring Romana or pushing Romana off or whatever. So it's a slightly compromised cliffhanger, but that's a decent shot. And of course, we've set up why she's not got her shoes on. But this, I think, is this is slightly compromised because we can't see him. It won't. Tom won't do it. That's a reasonable stunt, but it's from the angle is quite high, so it doesn't look like she's had a massive fall. It's compromised, that cliffhanger. I don't think it's a great cliffhanger. I suppose not seeing the Doctor means you're going, oh, I wonder what's going on there, but you also wonder, but what's going on there? So it's a tricky one. I have to say, well, when I first saw it, and I'd read what that cliffhanger was, and when you read what that cliffhanger is in Doctor Who episode guides or whatever, you go, okay, the Doctor lures Romana and pushes her off the cliff. Yeah, it's not quite. I mean, yes, it's difficult because I know what's supposed to happen, and I'm double guessing what somebody who hasn't seen that before might interpret that. But I think that's quite confusingly and not hugely successfully done. But I don't blame the director, Darryl Blake, who I think has done a nice job on that episode. I think that was actually nicely atmospheric, more atmospheric than I'd maybe thought it was. And I actually thought the videotape outside looked okay, looked kind of nice. The colours were nice. That those very white skies do sort of slightly blast the clarity at the back though, and it not as good as it would have looked on film, but certainly not as bad as I thought it would look. The atmosphere there was very nice, and I think the mystery is laid out extremely effectively and economically, and it kind of motors along. But I think my favourite thing about it is the Hammer-esque atmosphere, the stones, the nighttime, particularly the raven, the crow. The fact that they've actually got the creature and it performs to order, and it lands on the stone. You can get that great close up of it. You can have it in shot with the Doctor, with the focus and all of that. So yeah, I'm going to go for the hammery vibe, and that ties in with the missing portraits and the Dr. Borlays and the pictures of old people, and the fact that it stretches back through history, which it's reminiscent. It's evocative of those sort of real life horror books that I used to have one by Daniel Farson that was the Penguin book of. No, it was the something else book of. I've still got it upstairs somewhere, which had bits about horror from literature and bits about horror from films, but it also talked about Countess Bathory and real life and Ivan the Terrible and Vlad the Impaler. So it was a really evocative book that was a sort of only a normal sized paperback compendium of horror. The Beaver Book of Horror, was it? The Beaver Book of Horror. I think it was the Beaver Book of Horror. Was it the Beaver Book of Horror? I think it must have been. But anyway, I had that, and it had two kids on the cover on a red armchair with loads of monsters looking over them. And I used to take that on holiday and read it on journeys, and I read it over and over again. I wonder if I still have it. I haven't seen that around, but I wonder if I still have that. I hope I do. I hope I haven't lost it. But we've actually recently just got rid of a load of things, and I hope it wasn't amongst them. It could still be at my mum's house. It could be upstairs. Who knows? Anyway, You're not here. You're not going to help me. Look, you don't care. But the Beaver Book of Horror by Daniel Farson, that it reminds me of, and that's what I mean about the Dennis Wheatley stuff as well, and the stuff with the devil, is that it even though it's steeped in literature and folklore and stuff, it has that aspect that it could be real. Somehow devil worship, because it was actually practiced by real people in a way that being a vampire wasn't, or encountering Frankenstein didn't happen. That didn't happen in real life. This stuff, it just seemed as though it wasn't quite as once removed from us as other fictional horrors were. So always somehow slightly more evocative. So I'm going to go for the devil worshipy, real life horror-y, hammer horror kind of vibe to the Stones of Blood, which I think is its headline appeal, really. What is Stephen going to go for with his first choice? So his choice from episode 1 of the Stones of Blood. Over to you, Stephen Cranford.
So for episode 1 of the Stones of Blood, one of my favourite memories really is the horrible concept that you could tip blood on the stones themselves and they would come to life. And even now, all those years later, that sound of the heartbeat of the Ogre still has an effect on me. It's quite crazy, really, but that is one thing that stands out, certainly, that I think we first hear in episode 1.
We do. That's a good choice, and it's in that excellent opening scene, which is done in the studio, and all the more impressive for that at night, where it's the point of view of the Ogre, and we have the heartbeat. But it's a great concept, and I think that's why I felt as a youngster that this was the story that would be the most like a Doctor Who story, was because it's called The Stones of Blood, and it's about stones, which seem to be a very Doctor Who-y thing, that sucked blood from people, or that drank blood, or that were powered by blood, which seems just to be a wonderfully Doctor Who concept. So it's a great headline, isn't it? It's the one with the blood-sucking stones. What a great idea! And it is a really good choice. I didn't choose that because I think partially because you don't really see the Ogre in that episode, and they are a strong part of the story, I think. But for me, what spoke most about that opening instalment is the hammer horror, Dennis Wheatley, real life devil worshipy stuff, and all the iconography that sells that as well, and that infuses itself into the atmosphere of the story that, as we know, goes into hyperspace before the 130 minutes are up. Is it 130? Yeah, 140 minutes. Yeah. Anyway, I don't get a point for that, but I'm glad because this one's been hanging around for a while. In fact, it's been there's been several portraits taken off the wall and cleaned between me receiving this and getting it out for all to enjoy. So I hope Stephen hasn't felt too let down by that. As I say, it's not a reflection on him. It's just me mixing up the stories and sometimes just choosing what stories I'm in the mood for. And I nearly at the last minute did a reverse and did The Deadly Assassin Part 1. But no, I have gone for The Stones of Blood, a story that comes less easily to me, and I'm glad I did, because that was slightly fresher to me, maybe, and maybe I'll have a more interesting take. And maybe, actually, before I do the next episodes, I might actually watch it for pleasure first, because there's certainly a couple of those scenes, the dialogue scenes involving Vivian Fay and Professor Rumford, that I probably could have enjoyed as a viewer and not been struggling with quite so much as a commentator, because I haven't seen this story in probably, I should think 10, 11, 12, 13 years. So maybe that means that I'll have some pleasure viewing to do of Doctor Who, which is always nice, because I don't always, it's nicer when it's something I'm doing for the proper reasons, which is watching a programme that I enjoy, rather than doing it for, in inverted commas, work, which is sort of, I suppose, what this is. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me for the Stones of Blood, and let's feast on some more in the next adventure. But in the meantime, never trust a bald man offering you sherry in a country house. It'll only lead to disaster. But in the meantime, best wishes to you. Thanks very much for listening, and I will speak to you next time. Well, thank you very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke, with my special guest, Stephen Cranford, who you can find on Twitter or X at SB Cranford, and he's also there on Instagram as well. And I'm grateful to him, of course, and to the many patrons who make these podcasts possible, one of whom, Matt Dale, sadly passed away in the build-up to the recording of this episode. So I'd like to acknowledge Matt in the closing credits of this one. I never had the pleasure of meeting him, but he was a great friend, I know, of many listeners, and died far too young. So condolences to his friends and to his family, and thanks to him for his support. I'm also grateful to Ruben Herfindahl, Stephen Moffat, Peter Burns, James Curray-Smith, Peter Harness, Ronald Hayden, Rob Leonard, Christopher Meredith, Gavin McLean, Richard Straw, Neil Tate and Nick Tedstone. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you too would like to support these podcasts, you can go to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, where you get advanced releases. You get your names read out in the credits like that. Bonus materials, monthly AMAs, pictures of my dog, interactions, a lovely community, all sorts of other stuff. The tiers start from as little as £3 a month, and whatever tier you are on, you can get a 10% discount if you sign up for a year in one go. If you can't or don't want to do that and occasionally want to financially support these podcasts, you can do that at kofi.com/Toby Hadoke, where you can pretend you're buying me a coffee, but it's the same sort of thing. I know this is a begging bowl kind of thing that I'm doing here, but it is the way that independent creatives keep their head above water these days. So I'm acknowledging that that's what we do, but still also acknowledging that it's quite a shameful exercise. But there we go. It's optional. You don't have to. And it's there. But if you can do or don't want to do either, and that's perfectly understandable, you can support these in a way that involves no financial outlay at all, just by going to Apple, or iTunes, or Patreon, or Spotify, whatever you get, and digest these and giving them 5 stars, a 5-star rating, and a few positive lines of review really, really do help to make these algorithms look like they were freshly minted and of appeal to any passing trade who may want to pick up the freshest looking algorithm on the production. This is starting to sound decidedly dodgy. A nice review makes people see these, makes people listen to them, and you never know, it might just make their day. It won't make their day, but it might not ruin their day. They might like it. They might like it. They just might like it. And it means that this is slightly less pointless than it currently feels like it is. And that's it. It only feels like it's pointless because of what I'm doing right now, which is talking badly. So, because, yeah. Anyway, you know what I mean. You know why I'm asking you to do this, probably. And if you don't, quick, go and give these 5 stars. Don't punish it for this. This is the post-credits bit. This isn't part of the content. This is very much the afterthought. There's the social media business as well. At Hadoke Podcasts on Twitter or X. Will that ever catch on? It certainly hasn't as I record this. I'm on Twitter or X at Toby Hadoke, and I'm also on Instagram at toby.hadoke, and I'm getting better at that and putting funky videos on. Please follow. Yes, Daniel Farson, who was a mate of Francis Bacon and Geoffrey Bernard and Tom Baker. So there is a Doctor Who connection. I think Dan Farson, as they called him, and Tom Baker used to drink Soho Dry. But yeah, it's the Beaver Book of Horror. I found it here online, but I hope I've still got. I think I got it I think that was another book that I got as a prize at school. So that's maybe why I think about it in the same vein as The Stones of Blood, because I think I got it at around the same time and at the same school. Things that go. I'm reading the blurb off the back of it's on Goodreads. Things that go bump in the night are bad enough, but what about capitals? Vampires who live off human blood. Capitals, werewolves killed only by a silver bullet. Capitals, killer cats, monsters, and zombies. Are there such things? Come into the world of the mysterious and the unknown and decide for yourself if you dare. Includes a horror quiz and black and white photographs. Cover illustration by Alan Lee. Well, it's a great cover illustration. Oh, first published 1977, November 77. But I would have got it in the early to mid 80s for sure. Wonder why killer cats get the same prominence as monsters and zombies. Never think of killer cats as being particularly high on the list, but Alan Lee's cover is excellent. In fact, somebody on the Goodreads has given it a review that says doubtful about the quality of the contents, but I love this cover. Well, actually, Evans liked the contents were marvellous because it was a really, it was quite intelligently written, but accessible. And as I say, it had historical heft and it just made it all sound, real and important, and genuinely knew how to evoke the spooks and crossed over between fictional horrors and actual horrors, and that's always a lovely mix. So the Beaver Book of Horror, how lovely! Well done, Daniel Farson. But that was definitely a big part of my reading as a youth.